What up, everybody? It is me, Mr. Know Everything. We're going to do the New Answers book 1, chapter 2. Why shouldn't Christians accept millions of years? Terry Mortensen. There is an intensifying controversy in the church all over the world regarding the age of the earth. For the first 18 centuries of church history, the almost universal belief of Christians was that God created the world in 6 literal days, roughly 4,000 years before Christ, and destroyed the world with a global flood at the time of Noah. But about 200 years ago, some scientists developed new theories of Earth history, which proposed that the Earth and universe are millions of years old. Over the past 200 years, Christian leaders have made various attempts to fit the millions of years into the Bible. These include the day-age view, gap theory, local flood view, framework, hypothesis, theistic evolution, and progressive creation. A growing number of Christians, now called young Earth creationists, including many scientists, hold to the creational view, believing it to be the only view that is truly faithful to Scripture, and that fits the scientific evidence far better than the residing on Earth evolutionary theory. Many Christians say that the age of the Earth is an unimportant and divisive side issue that hinders the proclamation of the gospel. But is that really the case? Answers in Genesis and many other creationist organizations think not. In this chapter, I want to introduce you to some of the reasons we think that Christians cannot accept the millions of years without doing great damage to the church and her witness in the world. Other chapters in this book will go into much more detail on these issues. Number 1. The Bible clearly teaches that God created in 6 literal 24-hour days a few thousand years ago. The Hebrew word for day in Genesis 1 is yom. In the vast majority of its uses in the Old Testament, it means a literal day, and where it doesn't, the context makes this clear. The context of Genesis 1 clearly shows that the days of creation were literal days. First yom is defined the first time it is used in the Bible, Genesis 1:4-5, in its two literal senses, the light portion of the light-dark cycle and the whole light-dark cycle. Second, yom is used with evening and morning. Everywhere these two words are used in the Old Testament, either together or separately. And with or without yom in the context, they always mean a literal evening or morning of a literal day. Third yom is modified with a number, 1 day, 2nd day, 3rd day, etc., which everywhere else in the Old Testament indicates literal days. Fourth, yom is defined literally in Genesis 1:13 in relation to the heavenly bodies. Number 3. The genealogies of Genesis 5 and 11 make it clear that the creation days happened only about 6,000 years ago. It is transparent from the genealogies of Genesis 5 and 11, which give very detailed chronological information, unlike the clearly abbreviated genealogy in Matthew 1. Another chronological information in the Bible that the creation week took place only about 6,000 years ago. Number 4, Exodus 29-11 blocks all attempts to fit millions of years into Genesis 1. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Exodus 29-11. This passage gives the reason for God's command to Israel to work 6 days and then take a Sabbath rest. Yom is used in both parts of the commandment. If God meant that the Jews were to work 6 days because He created over 6 long periods of time, He could have said that using one of the 3 indefinite Hebrew time words. He chose the only word that means a literal day, and the Jews understood it literally, until the idea of millions of years developed in the early 19th century. For this reason, the day-age view or framework hypothesis must be rejected. The gap theory or any other attempt to put millions of years before the 6 days are also false, because God says that in 6 days he made the heaven and the earth, and sea and all that is in them. So he made everything in those 6 literal days and nothing before the first day. Number 5. Noah's flood washes away millions of years. The evidence in Genesis 5:6-9 for a global catastrophic flood is overwhelming. For example, the flood was intended to destroy not only all sinful people, but also all land animals and birds and the surface of the earth, which only a global flood could accomplish. The ark's purpose was to save 2 of every kind of land animal and bird, and 7 of some, to repopulate the earth after the flood. The ark was totally unnecessary if the flood was only local. People, animals, and birds could have migrated out of the flood zone before it occurred, or the zone could have been populated from creatures outside the area after the flood. The catastrophic nature of the flood is seen in the non-stop rain for at least 40 days, which would have produced massive erosion, mudslides, hurricanes, etc. The Hebrew words translated, "the fountains of the great deep burst open," Genesis 7:11, clearly point to tectonic rupturing of the Earth's surface in many places for 150 days, resulting in volcanoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Noah's flood would produce exactly the kind of complex geological record we see worldwide today. Thousands of feet of sediments clearly deposited by water and later hardened into rock and containing billions of fossils. If the year-long flood is responsible for most of the rock layers and fossils, then those rocks and fossils cannot represent the history of the Earth over millions of years, as evolutionists claim. Jesus was a young Earth creationist.
I ain't dying.
Jesus consistently treated the miracle accounts of the Old Testament as straightforward, truthful historical accounts. E.g., creation of Adam, Noah and the flood, Lot and his wife in Sodom, Moses and the manna, and Jonah and the fish. He continually affirmed the authority of Scripture over men's ideas and traditions. Matthew 15:1-9. In Mark 10:6, we have the clearest but not the only statement showing that Jesus was a younger creationist. He teaches that Adam and Eve were made at the beginning of creation, not billions of years after the beginning, as would be the case if the universe were really billions of years old. So if Jesus was a younger creationist, then how can his faithful followers have any other view? Number 7, belief in millions of years undermines the Bible's teaching on death and on the character of God. Genesis 1 says 6 times that God called the creation good, and when he finished creation on day 6, he called everything very good. Man and animals and birds were originally vegetarian, Genesis 1:29-30. Plants are not living creatures, as people and animals are, according to Scripture. Well, Adam and Eve sinned, resulting in the judgment of God on the whole creation instantly. Adam and Eve died spiritually, and after God's curse, they began to die physically. The serpent and Eve. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. So, where